Hello friends, today we're going to be talking about Mars in Sagittarius squaring Saturn in the sign of Pisces. And you know what? This is one of the hardest aspects in astrology. And let me frame it like this for you guys. This is one of those moments when the systems or powers that once had power over you are starting to sense that you're rising. They're feeling that there's something within you that is refusing to collapse now. You are not collapsing under command. And that's when their grip gets a lot more tight. And you know this atmosphere because that's when guilt starts to get more sharp, their pressure thickens, and the old stories that they generally try to use to pull you right back in. And you know, we have a tendency to fall into this because the old stories pull us back. It's almost like the body remembers a survival instinct. So we can shrink a little, stay more quiet, and just keep the peace so that we don't feel the lashback. So this is the psychological field that Mars and Saturn are operating in right now. So Mars wants to start moving, but Saturn wants to dissolve your footing. This is when our truth wants a sense of direction now. And then fear rises in that same exact moment. And this square doesn't just end here. This is the first activation that's actually going to intensify throughout December. And we'll see this when Sun makes the same square to Saturn, which is by far one of the most difficult aspects in astrology. And if you want to catch those videos, please remember to subscribe so YouTube sends you a notification. And now, without further ado, let's get right into this transit. And for those of you who've been watching this channel, you know that I put the transits in the context of a larger narrative, because that's what we human beings do. We live our lives in a story. So I'm going to first put this transit in the context of the ongoing narratives of the transits. And if you think about it, for weeks, we've been living inside that water triad where Scorpio was exposing the undercurrents of our lives, Pisces was dissolving what we can no longer hold on to, and Jupiter in Cancer was helping us understand and recognize the emotional body that we live in. And these transits weren't just making us feel stuff. They were allowing us to see things very clearly. They were making us understand the architecture of our pain, the way we've been wired throughout a lifetime, the patterns that we've been carrying, and most importantly, the emotional cost of the stories that we have as our life story. So this water triad was kind of like a rebirth, and not in a glamorous or a poetic way. It was raw, honest, and it was unavoidable because it went on for so long. And if you think about it, it actually started with that debilitated Mars in Cancer a year ago. But all of that was necessary because we needed the emotional foundation for this transition from water signs to air and fire, which is getting initiated by the square from Mars to Saturn. So now let's just take a brief moment to understand what Mars is doing in Sag, because now the fire comes in. And with Mars in Sag, something shifts, and that's our emotions are becoming our orientation. We're starting to understand what it means for our memories, everything that we experience, these stories that we have, how they have become the philosophy of our life. We're understanding how to transmute pain into meaning. So our previous experiences are becoming our sense of direction, like the bow and arrow and Sag. So this is the moment where our truth wants movement. It wants a path. It wants a life that now reflects what it knows. We right now want to turn wisdom into action. And Mars in Sag right now is our will to move forward. It wants us to move forward from a place of clarity, which was earned the hard way for a long time now, again, referencing back that Mars in Cancer. This square is saying that the moment you move, the moment that you try to step towards your truth, the moment that you try to rise right now, Saturn in Pisces is going to respond. And it's not going to do this with walls or rules, the way Saturn usually likes to do things, but rather by creating a kind of an awkward atmosphere, which is an atmosphere of fear, doubt, feeling disoriented suddenly. There's a psychic heaviness in the air. It almost feels like an inner collapse, as if there is some sort of an emotional fog. It's like the sense of feeling too depleted, so depleted that it's hard to stand up. And the insinuation of Saturn here is trying to say to you, you have no foundation, no ground. Saturn's harsh and brutal. So Saturn wants to say you actually don't have a right to move right now. So this is a Saturn in Pisces that is trying to pressure Mars. But I want you to remember Mars is in a superior position to Saturn. So Mars is actually more powerful, but Saturn is also making that square. It's like a 10th aspect to Mars. So Saturn does have something to say here. So the way Saturn's pressurizing Mars is to weaponize the dissolved state that has been creating in Pisces. It's amplifying this fear that's telling you can't do this. You're not strong enough, that your identity is too thin to hold this trajectory that you're aiming with your bow and arrow. So it's creating a lot of doubt and uncertainty. And yet, when you look at it, something inside of us wants to move, and not recklessly or impulsively, but because you have gone through so much emotionally that you know any alternative right now would be a kind of a self-betrayal, to stand still and to let Saturn induce this fear and for you to believe it. So Mars in Sag is saying right now, I'm not going to shrink anymore. I can't collapse with you or for you. I can't return back to what's already been dissolved. I have to stand in the truth that I've now earned. I mean, so many things. Saturn has dissolved so many things. And this could include people. This could include relationships, work situations. Look at where Saturn is falling in which house, right? So there could be these demands that you should come back, but now you know better. So it's very hard to go against what you know. Right now, Mars wants action with integrity, action that has direction, action that has an aim, that is trying to get itself somewhere, not just move and just linger in some middle space anymore. And the action of Mars here right now says, I refuse to disappear from here forth. And this is important because I keep saying we're moving into the era of air and fire. We have to direct ourselves so that we can start moving upwards and outwards. But Saturn's not going to let this go. So there's going to be a kind of an escalation happening. We'll start to see around us that certain people around us are intensifying the guilt trips. Like we always sense that there's hypocrisy in what they say and do, but right now it's going to get amped up. Their emotional pressure will start to increase. And not to mention, this is actually hard to say because there's some human beings in our lives that act like oppressors. But when we try to release ourselves from that oppression, that repression, that thing of make yourself small, suddenly the oppressor becomes the victim. So the boundaries that you have set, they become points of attack. In general, your truth right now can feel like a threat to a lot of people. And I just want you to know that this is the last bit of that previous story that you've been trying to work out. You've been feeling it so deeply, trying to understand your motives, your intents. Now you've understood something and you want to move out. But that story wants to pull you right back into a story that you've outgrown. And I want you to actually think and reflect about this. You wanting to move forward is not wrong. What's happening around you right now is a little bit of that water disclosure, people showing what's unhealthy within them. They're feeling you rising up and they can't do that because they can't make themselves rise. Unfortunately, some people have this tendency. When another person tries to rise up, instead of that other person getting motivated to move up with them, their first instinct is to pull down and then to push down. How dare you try to do better in life? This is a theme right now. And this is actually where the real astrology is at, because the square is always talking about some kind of a crossroad that needs resolution. Think about squares as like an intersection, two cars coming and they're about to collide into each other. So in order to resolve this problem, you have to understand what happened in that water triad. It's about knowing your truth and knowing that you will stand in it without compromising it. Or there's the other option, which will create that collision. Will you shrink to keep the peace? And just to go back to Mars and Sag for a second, Mars and Sag in general is talking about actions that are based on truth. That's how Mars wants to act. It's a fire sign, so it's talking about dharma. Mars wants to act with a sense of purpose. And in Sag, in a fire sign, a fire planet in a fire sign wants to cut through the inertia. It wants life to move forward. So it's looking for truth, direction, and all of it with a moral orientation. And this is because Sagittarius in general is not reckless fire, like Aries could be a little bit more reckless. Sag is a fire of illumination. It's about guiding meaning. So Mars here will do its best to stand in what's true, to take steps based on its inner convictions. So Mars here is not gonna live by narratives that are of other people's expectations, which are at contradiction to your truth. And also Mars in Sag is very purpose-driven. And coming out of that sign of Scorpio, all the planets moving through it, you understand yourself right now. You understand your emotional depth. And this Mars is saying, this Mars within you is saying, now I have to move in accordance to what I have learned. So this Mars wants to move outwards and forward with the inner emotional intelligence that we've gained. And now let's go back to Saturn again one more time so that we can understand this dynamic that's emerging from their interaction. Saturn in general can put a lot of pressure on us, and that's because Saturn represents scarcity, realism. It's about cause and effect, so it's constantly talking about consequences. And it's also talking about the weight of reality. And as I mentioned, Saturn in Pisces doesn't weigh us down or doesn't put pressure on us through rules and walls or material limits. Saturn pressures us through fear. Fear of not understanding the form and the way our life has been structured around us. It's like feeling instability, but not having the ability to explain why it feels that way. Like with this kind of a placement, a lot of guilt can just appear out of nowhere. Emotional heaviness that might not have a source. You're just sitting around and you're like, I feel very depressed and down, but I don't know why. So it's creating a lot of doubt that's dissolving our footing. It's been doing that since 2023. It's sending us subtle messages of, hey, you're not ready. You're not strong enough. You're not good enough. You're not capable enough. It's the psychic collapse. It wants us to collapse instead of having the ability to act. So it's talking about the erosion of our confidence and our sense of continuity in life. And Saturn's very psychological in Pisces because Saturn can actually start to feel like a covert oppressor. It doesn't move directly. It just starts to dissolve our grounding. And then in response, we're just constantly hesitating. That's what makes us defer. That's what's creating doubt. That's what's forcing us to constantly shrink. Saturns keep reminding us, you have no foundation to build on. You don't know enough. You can't support yourself. You're too depleted. You should just wait. If you try right now, you'll fail. Those people, they're way stronger than you. You're not going to win. So Saturn's blurring our vision towards the future, that thing that Mars is trying to do with the bow and arrow right now. Aim, point at the target, and it wants to release and move that way. And Saturn's just keep creating all this doubt. Saturn in Pisces is our emotional memory of our previous collapse. And that's like, we're giving into it right now. We could give into it. And then what we're going to do in response is that we're going to shrink ourselves again because Saturn's making it feel like rising up right now is very dangerous. And this is the force that Mars has to confront right now, the Mars within us, the fire within us. We have to figure out how to move and pierce through this fog. And this, I mean, like knowing your sense of direction and fog, very difficult. So we might have a hard time right now not understanding, well, how do I get myself out of here? I want to move out of here, but how? So these are the kinds of dynamics that we're dealing with. And because there's a fog, we don't have a straightforward path right now. So the life lessons of this moment are not necessarily about victories and how we're going to be triumphant. It's something a lot quieter and in a lot of ways a lot harder, which is about, will you stand in your truth and not budge? Let that be your compass pointing you towards your North Star. This moment is about, will you still act even though you feel so much fear? And this square is very much asking us right now, understand the patterns in your life, the patterns that keep making you shrink back down, make yourself smaller, stay silent, don't move, don't try. Don't act. Pay attention how it is that every time you try to rise, the pressure of people around you intensifies. When you speak, your narrative gets distorted. When you move, their guilt trip returns. When you make a choice, it's almost as if the ground beneath you starts shaking because they create so much instability around you. And I just want us to realize these things are going to happen. They're meant to happen during this square. This is what it's indicating. But this is also a time for us not to retreat this time. This is just the natural echo of the psychological system and systems in general that we've outgrown. So the life lessons that I'm going to describe right now is not so much about overcoming Saturn, overcoming those oppressors, repressive individuals, the bullies of our lives. More than anything is about not collapsing to your old self and how you used to do things. It's like I always remind myself, it doesn't matter what other people say. It doesn't matter what the expectations are. I just have to know my standard. And no matter what the situation is, I uphold my own standard. This is what this moment's kind of like. Align yourself to the things that you discovered through all those water transits. That's the only way for us right now to move into this era of air and fire and be on a trajectory that's authentic and true to us. But I do want to talk about some shadows with the square, especially when we talk about difficult aspects or combinations in astrology. The shadows become very prominent. And even in my other videos, when it comes to trines and the more lovely aspects, I talk about the shadows because we need a lot of maturity to understand how to have the best expression and manifestation of them. Squares in general challenge us. So a lot of those shadow aspects of the self and our life can come to the forefront. So let's move through the shadows. Shadow number 1, it's about shrinking instead of rising. And this is about reverting back to our old behaviors because it just feels more predictable, which means it feels more safe. It feels more safe than to confront the moment. Even though right now, safety is an illusion because we are supposed to break through. Shadow number 2, betraying your truth to keep the peace. And this is about telling a softer version of what you actually know, or avoiding your truth not to experience the backlash of people that are around you. That's why at the beginning I framed it. Sometimes we want to rise. There are certain people in our lives that they want us to shrink and bring us back to the size that they want us to be. And right now, because of what you know, to do that is to betray yourself. That's something to be aware of. Shadow number 3, inflating instead of acting. And what I mean by that, this is about turning Sagittarius fire into some sort of a moral grandstanding. Instead of doing the action, you or other people around you can be just talking big, dreaming big, philosophizing, while avoiding the grounded actions that are necessary right now. Shadow number 4, collapsing into Saturn's fog. Please don't collapse into Saturn's fog, which is letting Saturn interpret the situation for you. Like sometimes fear becomes so intense that we start to even attach our intuition and start to get signs. But when you actually pay attention, they're coming from our shadows. They're the things that telling us not to act, to pull back, to shrink down. Like Saturn right now it's creating so much exhaustion that it can masquerade itself as a sign. Like, don't act, not today, not now. Really think through it. Yes, you might legitimately be exhausted and it's good to listen to that and to rest. But there's this kind of existential exhaustion that could be there. I want you to examine that. And another thing with Saturn, there can be a lot of guilt coming your way. But the point is to see that guilt and not let it be the thing that determines our path. But shadow number 5, which is about fighting blindly. And that is letting the Mars within us become reactive to the moment. And whenever we're reactive, we're not acting with clarity. We're not acting from a place of our truth, not from our standard. To be reactive ultimately leads to losing our orientation. And all that is burning our energy in the wrong place. And I'm telling you, Saturn is creating exhaustion right now. So it's not like we have ample energy and we can just burn some off because we actually need to. We have to be thoughtful right now. And shadow number 6. And I'm moving through these fast because these videos can go to like 2 hours long and I don't know who watches 2-hour videos. But shadow number 6 is about creating false narrative of strength. And this is actually about not understanding where we're at. We're at the starting line right now, not the finish line. Because yes, we are coming to a sense of completion with understanding ourselves, but how we can now externally move and orient ourselves, this is the beginning. So it's good not to overstate our capabilities, not setting goals that are too crazy and lofty. The point right now is to understand what we're building, what increment of actions are necessary within that framework. And that is part of being truthful in this moment. And again, this will get us closer and closer to what it means to move upwards and outwards in our life without exhausting ourselves and collapsing, which is what Saturn wants anyway. And I also want you to remember, none of these are inherently bad. Like if we fall into these shadow points, these are just ways that the psyche has learned to protect itself, especially when the old systems feel threatened. But the point is that they are the deviation from all the realizations that we have had since 2023. We stand in a different kind of a truth today than 2 years ago. And that's a pretty big statement because sometimes it'll take us decades to understand one life lesson. But because we've been going through these water elements, which is our internal self and our emotion, our internal configuration, we have learned a lot. A lot of us are not the same person that we were in 2023. and hopefully for the better and not for the worse. And now, after talking about the shadows, let's talk about integration, because that's very important. We have to know how to integrate the shadow or the shadows. And this will also help us understand how to negotiate with the hardship that's coming out of this square and with the next one, which is Sun square Saturn. But I'll talk about that in another video. And the first thing to remember, integration, to state the obvious, is not about winning. It's not about proving yourself. And it's definitely not about showing the oppressor that you're stronger. That's pretty much a waste of time. Integration is something far more intimate. Again, it's about acting from your truth, your new standard, without negotiating yourself away. And especially to negotiate yourself away because you're trying to manage another person's impression or reaction towards you or their expectations. So here's what integration looks like. Let's go through some of the lessons. Lesson number 1, which is about stay with your inner direction. And I want you to know Mars at its best in the sign of Sag will do what it thinks is true, and it will do it without applause or acknowledgement. It will do it most certainly without needing permission from anyone. All Mars in Sag needs is direction. One clear, honest direction, and the Mars within you will take the first step. This is the first thing to understand. Lesson number 2, name your fear without bowing to it. And Saturn in Pisces right now is creating tremendous amount of fear and uncertainty. Precisely where you have the intent to rise, the way that you have the intent to pull yourself up. And do not take your fear as an omen to stop. It's actually a sign when you feel fear that you are moving the boundaries of the old parameters and configurations of your life. You're actually stepping into a new atmosphere, and you're actually feeling fear because you're moving towards the right direction. This square is telling us, oh, that water activity was telling us that we had to understand something to be able to grow from it. And whatever that feels secure and safe, which is our old patterns, we've done it a million times, even if it's painful and wrong, there is no sense of fear about it. People who've been in abusive relationships or situations for too long, the abuse, they don't fear it anymore because that is the pattern. It's moving out of it that actually induces the fear. Lesson number 3, and I'm sitting in such an uncomfortable way. Expect backlash without interpreting it, because this square is saying that you will get a backlash for being assertive and acting. And again, don't take this as a message that you're wrong. This is just a message that you're not compliant and you're not complicit anymore. When we put Mars in fire signs, Mars gets very courageous. Lesson number 4, hold your boundary without aggression. Mars at its best in Sagittarius can speak very cleanly and clearly. And trust me, Mars is not the cleanest planet, but Sag is talking about higher knowing, higher way of being. So Mars at its best can actually do this. And what I mean by that is that we don't aim our fire at other people, but we hold the fire in our own spine. It's our courage in knowing. And when we know something, that knowing has a posture. It allows us to speak firmly in an assertive way, set our boundaries and stay with our boundaries. We have a sense of direction and an uncompromising movement towards it. So this is not a moment to fight with others. This is about directing your energy and aiming it towards what it is that you need, where it is that you're going. And lesson number 5, in this moment, just because we're coming out of water signs, let your actions be small, but true. And I'm saying this because Sagittarius wants a clear trajectory. It doesn't want theatrics. Leo might, but not Sag. And integration right now means the willingness to move slow, but in alignment. And we need to move slow because we're coming from a completely different mode of being. We need to build the momentum, the speed. So know where the bullseye is, and the bullseye is our standard. Practice pointing at it and keep practice shooting towards it till it lands, and just keep walking that way. Lesson number 6, just accept that growth right now can feel like disloyalty to a lot of people and a lot of systems around you. And you know what? This is the hardest part of this transit, because honestly, sometimes we love people, and those people that we love, we want them to root for us. We want them to be on board with us. We don't want acknowledgement of strangers. We want the acknowledgement of the people that we love. And those are the same very people that might problematize your growth right now. And that is the hardest part, because you standing your truth right now can feel like a betrayal to them. It's unfortunate, but sometimes we love people, but those same very people benefit from us shrinking and not growing. It justifies their own shadows, their own situation, their own pattern ways of thinking. For you to grow, it's going to challenge them, and they don't want to meet the challenge. So the solution is again to bring you down. It's very sad when you see people around you that you interact with, people that you love, that there's a sense of glee in them when you're stuck and when you're failing. And every time you try to rise, they try to disarm you. They sabotage you. But this is a theme at this moment. And all you have to know in this moment is that you going against them, not paying them any heed, is to actually not betray yourself. Let them feel betrayed. Your aim right now should be to return to yourself. So those were the lessons. And if I was to just summarize the essence of what this integration is about, the square is not asking you to win, but it's asking you not to abandon yourself, especially when the pressure starts rising around your hard-earned truth. And I want you to remember, this square is saying that growth right now is not a breakthrough. It's actually a decision. It's the decision of you saying, I will not collapse, especially for those things and people who are trying to hold me down. It's about saying, I will act from what I now know. And I'm going to move my life in that direction, to the direction of that truth. And I want you to remember, this truth was so hard earned. Again, going back to 2023, again, going back to that Mars being debilitated in Cancer, that was like months of us grappling with our interiority through the symbolism of Mars. And then we had all of this Scorpio activity. This is not a joke. The truth that we have right now is hard earned. And we also shouldn't take it for granted that Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer. It's almost like the universe is rooting for us to understand better, to have a greater sense of internal coherency, to know our truth and to move in that direction. And this Mars in Sag squaring Saturn like this is the precursor. We're starting to get a taste of what it's like to be in that era of fire and air, which I explained extensively in the previous video with that Mercury trine Saturn. I'll put the link to that video in the description box below. And what it means to move into the era of air and fire is that we don't have so much time for self-reflexivity anymore, to be introspective. Very soon, by next summer, because even the nodes will move into fire and air signs, we are just going to be in a mode of ideas and actions. We have to think on our feet, and our truth and our standards that we're setting right now and learning how to act towards them is what's going to stand as our North Star. So if you're feeling the pressure right now, the guilt, the distortion, the old atmosphere rising, people doing what they've always done, just know that this is not a sign that you're going backwards. It's actually a sign that you're being nudged to the correct trajectory of your life and the directions becoming real. To become uncomfortable right now is actually a very good thing, because that means we're getting out of our old patterns. And you know what? I've said a lot of things about Saturn, but Saturn in Pisces is also testing our movements. It wants to know, are they coming from this person's place of truth? Is it coming because they want to hold on to the old security paradigms of their life? Or are they just acting from a place of fear? Because acting from your place of fear is very different than acting from a place of truth. Saturn wants to know, is this person actually working hard and making an effort to align their actions? Or are they just going along with all that inherited way of thinking that has its own actions? And Saturn right now is also working in the background, inducing fear when we revert back. So as much as Saturn might be acting like a bully right now, in a lot of ways, Saturn is also helping us, because I want you to remember, Saturn is in a sign that belongs to Jupiter. The ruler of Pisces is exalted right now. So we could say Saturn does have the better intent right now with all of its cruelty. So the square isn't here to break us. It's here to show us the exact point where our lives can divide into two paths. The one that keeps us small, or the one that can match the person that we've become. And the moment that we choose the second path, even in the smallest increments, through the smallest gestures, it's when the story starts to change its trajectory. I mean, you know what? Something can change its direction like this, or just a little nudge, little nudge, little nudge, little nudge, 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 and then eventually it's going somewhere else. And I would say this story needs about 2 years to complete itself. So it's not like, oh my God, we got a Mars square Saturn and then sun's coming in and then we have all that stuff in Aquarius. So yes, but like in the next 6 months, my life should be somewhere else. No, this is again going back why I give you the narrative of the transits. I want us to understand our life story, which happens in increments, event by event, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time. And before closing this video, if this video helped you in any way, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment. I love to know how you're experiencing this square, and I hope with some of you, a lot of you, will go through this air and fire era, and we'll share our stories and just see how all of this is unfolding. And I want you to know I'll continue making the content because this is something that I love. But it's not lost on me that this channel is growing because of your participation. And thank you for that. And if you want to understand how this transit's unfolding in your charts or the totality of your charts, the blueprints, the beautiful blueprints designated to you, you can go to my email address in the description box below or to parisayazdi.com for more information. And I'll leave you with this. I wish you clarity, and the kind of clarity that does not need permission, the kind that rises quietly from within, the kind that is steady enough to carry you through far past whatever tries to pull you back. And with the bow and arrow of Sagittarius, as an archer, may you see past the horizon, and may your arrow reach the bullseye of your vision and intentions. That's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.